Hello, Jan. How are you doing?
Great. It's good to see you again.
It's my pleasure to see you again. And I must tell you, when I met you for the first time in the Global Welsh event, and when you talked about your journey, from Wales to USA, and you're thinking about, leadership and authentic leadership, I was fascinated. I was like, I must have a chat with Jan someday over a podcast. So here we are, right, Jan? So Jan, just to understand, coming from a different background, you are coming from the farming family background. Your father was a farmer, right? And then you got into automotive. How did that happen?
That's a good question. Well, I grew up on a small farm outside of Bridgend in a small village of Coity. And I come from a long line of farmers. My mother was a farmer. I came from farming. So did my father. But they never really wanted me to go into farming because they knew it was a lot of hard work and very little money. So they tried to get me to generate interests in something else. But the problem was they didn't really know. That's all they knew was farming. And back then, when I came out of college in the early 80s, that we didn't have the internet. We couldn't search for jobs in other countries or other places. It was really hard work to figure out what you wanted to do with your career. So there was a small staffing agency, temp agency in Bridgend called the Jennifer Griffiths Staffing Agency. And I went in there and I signed up and they called me and they said, "We got this temp job for you. It's at a company called BorgWarner, which is one of the largest auto suppliers on the planet." And of course, well, I knew none of this. And I remember when I would drive to Swansea, because I went to Swansea for my degree, and as I was driving to Swansea, I would see this BorgWarner plant at the Kenfig Industrial Estate. And I always thought they made batteries, which is kind of weird now when you consider where we're at today with EVs. So I went in as a temp, and I don't know, I think I earned a few pounds an hour, not a lot. And I made coffee and I copied blueprints and I did whatever they wanted me to do because I was a purchasing assistant. And that's where my career started, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow, that's fascinating. So did you not feel awkward, like, working in that, let's say, that setting, which was, how can I say, it is all in the men's
All
world?
new.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
all
Oh,
new,
oh,
right?
oh. When I first walked onto the shop floor, it was a transmission assembly plant. So when I walked onto the shop floor, women walking onto the shop floor back then was, it was an event. And they would bang their tools on the bench and shout and scream and yell, like, whoa, because a woman had walked onto the shop floor. So I didn't know any better. I didn't know whether that was right or wrong or good or bad. I just accepted it because that was the environment that I went into. Back in those days, we all smoked in the office. It was a totally different environment. The women were expected to make the coffee because I was the young girl in the office. So, of
Right.
course, I had to make the coffee. I would have to take the meeting notes. It was just expected. I mean, now, can you imagine that? Can you imagine having a young woman in an office and turning to her and saying, "Oh yeah, that'll be 2 sugars and a cream, please, in my coffee." I mean, it just wouldn't happen, right? But you
Absolutely.
didn't. That was the way it was back then, and I learned. I've always learned to understand the environment that I'm in and assimilate into that environment. So we all look at the behaviors of the people around us, of the bosses, of the leaders, and we look at, okay, so this is what I need to do to get promoted. And I looked at that, and every company I've ever worked at has been a little bit different, but there's definitely the same thread of leadership and culture running through the auto industry.
Right. So Jan, when I meet you now, for example, you come across as a very confident, accomplished, strong, woman, a strong person, I should say, right? Were you always like that in the early days? Were you always, that strong-headed person, or something's changed, you learned something about your personality? How did you develop into this, strong, personality and an influencer, for example? Because when you were, doing the job, your first job, there was no
Yeah.
such thing of, influencer, being,
No.
being an influencer. There was no social media, to be fair, right? How did you, become this Jan Griffiths that you are today? What's the journey
Well,
like?
thank you. Well, I think in the beginning I was nervous. I wouldn't say shy. I've always been known for being direct. I've always been
Right,
known for my energy level, for having a high energy level, and for being direct. That's never changed.
right.
But I didn't know what I was doing, in BorgWarner in the early days, but I was hungry for knowledge and I was hungry to learn. And that's what I did. I didn't have much of a filter. So sometimes my language would be Welsh farm girl language, which does not fly well in American corporate culture, I'll tell you that. But that directness was seen as probably aggressive and brash. And I've learned over the years to tone it down a bit. In fact, I was told once I was working as a program manager for Bosch and I was moving into a customer facing role. And somebody told me, he said, I think this is the worst decision they've ever made to put you in that role because you're too direct.
Hmm.
And it's funny, I remember that. And that was decades ago. And I can remember that conversation like it was yesterday. And I thought, well, why does he think this? What is wrong with me? I'm just saying what I believe is right. When is that ever wrong? So I really had to learn to filter it and tone it down a bit, but never losing sight of the fact that authenticity was part of my core, it was part of my being. I just didn't have a word for it.
Right, I understand now. So, let's talk about this, being direct, right? So we come across many people and they say, "Hey, I'm a very frank person. I'm direct," and that might work for some people. For some people that doesn't really work, for example, right? And especially when you are in this industry, where as you mentioned, that being direct might be considered as brash or rude, for example. How one can strike a balance, for example, when when to be direct or even just say your thing, what's on your mind, but in a way that is not taken as, let's say, in a negative way, for example. Do you have any tips on that? People who are just absolutely direct, but how
Yeah.
they can come across as not, how should I say, non-articulative, or like how
Yeah,
you want
yeah.
to, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, right? It's difficult. But here's the secret. You your comments have to come from the heart. You
Right.
have to be well intentioned. When you are well intentioned, people can sense that. They know it. When I've had people working on my team and I know that there's a performance issue, they need to do something differently. I will talk to them very directly about the behavior or the result or whatever the thing is that we're working on. And it's taken well because they know that I genuinely care about them and I'm doing it because I want them to do better. I would be doing them a disservice if I sat there and said, "Oh yeah, your work is great. Everything's great. Yeah, la 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 la." I mean, yes, it's important for positive reinforcement, and you have to recognize people when recognition is due. But you also have to be direct and tell people when they need that feedback that something has to change, but give them the reasons why and make sure you're coming from a good place. When you learn to tune in the heart to your head and it's well intentioned, you can do it.
No, absolutely. It should come from the heart. I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. Thank you very much. I really loved it. It should come from the heart, well intentioned. As you mentioned. When I first met you and I was, listening to you speak about authentic leadership, which is also, in your book, that is, Automotive 2.0, the Leadership 2.0, for example.
Yeah.
So, what exactly is authentic leadership, and why not just use the word leadership? Is leadership also, inauthentic sometimes?
Good question. So, the leadership model in most industries, but I can speak more specifically to the auto industry, has followed very much of a command and control type of model. So, the boss sits at the top. And if you see an org chart, you typically see the boss at the top and then everybody underneath, right? Him or her. And it's very much, I will tell you what to do. I will micromanage you. I will give you the results. It's all me, right? It's not so much of the we're in this together. This is our vision. We're going to achieve this together. This is about working together. And then the command and control, often you see a blame culture come along with command and control. So threats, if you don't do that, then this will happen.
Right. Yeah.
And then you live in fear. And I've lived through those types of leadership models because automotive is at the that's the hallmark of command and control in automotive.
Yes.
And I learned how to not only survive but thrive in that environment, but not lose myself completely.
Yes.
And I learned over the decades, as I've been in this industry now, I was in corporate America for 35 years and then another 6 years in my own business. So it's the industry is changing, and I have learned that it's much better to, first of all, be who you are, be comfortable in your own skin. Being authentic doesn't mean showing up to work and spilling your guts on everything, professional and personal, but it does mean speaking from the heart,
Yeah.
and it does mean humility. It's about transparency. If you don't know something, admit it. I mean, I was trained never to show weakness. Never. Never cry at work. Never show that you're a mother at
Hmm.
work. Never. So when my child was sick, I would call in and say that I was sick. I would never say that I was staying home because my child was sick, because that would be seen as that would be another reason for them to put a strike against me. See, she's a single mom, so she's going to be taking all the time off to stay home to look after the kid. So you got to be careful. I had to think about all these things growing up in this environment, but I learned that you, it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to be mean and nasty and tough. It's okay to be nice. And in fact, you'll bring people into you much closer when you show your human side than if you try to subscribe to this model of being the tough guy. And so many people, Amar, think that you got to be this tough guy to be a good boss, and you do not.
Oh, absolutely. So I completely agree with you on this, that you have to be real. In the end, we all are human beings, and we have our emotions, weaknesses. We have a family to take care of. It's not just business and numbers. I completely agree. But do you agree that the world is designed in a very awkward way? Because we are told from the very beginning that you are the leader. You have to behave like one. Be this tough guy. Always have this tough facade on your face. Be like this always, even if you are completely nervous. Just show the false ego, or the false front in front of you, and then you are a leader. I personally have always felt that if you're real, if you're in control, I have always felt that if I'm real, I'm being honest, I'm in control, rather than just being like this and say yes, I'm a leader, and whereas I'm not. So the funny thing is, I think somewhere down the line, from the very beginning, when we have the university students or people who are learning to be entrepreneurs or learning
Mhm.
to be managers, somewhere down the line, I think we have given them this wrong information of being a leader, right? And that's where people like you come in the picture, who have been there, done that. And and your book and your theory about authentic leadership, comes to save them to understand what exactly the leadership is about. Because we are looking at this new generation, that is Gen Z, and they have all these tools and technologies where they can get the job done much faster than, for example, in our era, when we started working. So leadership, I think, is now changing, right? Do you see it is changing now? Like, do you see that the corporate America, for example, is changing? Do you see different kind of leaders, the kind of leaders that you would like to see, or it is still in early stages of, let's say, reinventing what leadership is?
I think I've seen quite a dramatic shift even in
Really?
the last 6 months. And I'll give you
Right.
an example. Stellantis, Carlos
Right.
Tavares, the former CEO of Stellantis,
Yeah.
classic automotive command and control, maniacal focus on cost reduction, focus on the numbers. Look, as the leader of any business, of course you got to focus on the numbers. You got a business to run, but you cannot make it everything that you do. You have to bring the people along with you. You have to generate and create a vision and a mission, and you need to lead from the heart. Carlos Tavares blamed everybody.
Mm.
He threatened legal action against the UAW, the union in the US. He took and continues, well, the company continues to take legal action against the suppliers. The dealers are not happy with him. The shareholders are not happy with him and threaten to sue him. So this style of leadership, where he sits at the top and barks orders, and you're supposed to jump and do everything he said, that is not going to work. So the fact that he is out at Stellantis, that is one of the finest examples of command and control. Um, Underscoring that command and control is no longer the model that we
Right.
need to
Yeah.
follow in this
Sure.
industry. Now, compare that to in the supplier world, Martin Fisher, who was president of ZF Industries in the US. He finished his time with ZF and he has now been appointed CEO of Forvia, which is
Hmm.
the old Forza,
Right.
global CEO. Here's a man, I've interviewed him on my podcast, who truly understands authentic leadership. He is not the Carlos Tavares type in any way, shape, or form. He knows how to run a business, he knows how to make a business profitable, but he knows how to do it by bringing the people along with him. And that's the mindset switch. And he will be in place as CEO of Forvia in March of 2025.
Right. So it's changing already, and these companies, they want to reinvent their own leadership style, to stay relevant. For example, I
Yep.
think that's very, very important. So Jan, I have this question in my mind. People go through many different things in life, and whether it's good or bad, uh, you have seen a lot of things happening in your career, and you raise the voice about authentic leadership. You raise the voice about leadership as a whole subject, and then the role of women in automotive and beyond. Why you? I mean, when did you decide that you want to talk about this? What was the moment and you said enough is enough, I'm going to talk about this thing? Because people undergo things but they don't talk about them, unfortunately. So what really made you this, I'm going to raise a voice on this? What was the moment like?
Well, you say, why me? I would say, why not me? Um, so I'm sitting in a conference room in my corporate job in an executive leadership team meeting, which we had every
Right.
Monday. And I'm feeling the life force drain out of me. And
uh
I'm thinking, something has got to change in this industry because this is not just happening in this tier one company. This is happening in tier ones all over the industry. We've got to change the way that we're working together.
hmm,
There's a better way to do this. I mean, so many people are miserable working in automotive, and that it doesn't need to be that way. So, I was in my early 50s, and typically most people would just cruise into retirement at that point. And I could. I wasn't restructured out. I could have cruised into retirement. I had industry recognition. I was named to the top 100 leading women in the industry. Everything was
yes.
good. Everything was great. And I said, no, I can't do this. I cannot just sit in this chair, take this paycheck, and cruise into retirement. So I quit. And my boss didn't believe me at first. And I quit my job and I started my own business. And I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I started my podcast. I didn't know what I was doing. I believe in myself, Amar, and I believe that I will figure it out. And that's kind of a thread that runs through my entire life. And I quit. I started my own business. And my first two clients, I had two big speaking gigs the week of lockdown. So they were canceled because they were scheduled for that week we went into lockdown with COVID. So they were canceled. And then I was on unemployment. So I went from a corporate C-suite salary to unemployment. So that was fun. I can laugh about it now. I wasn't laughing about it then, but I got through it, and here we are. And I love what I'm doing. I work with clients on their culture workshops for their leadership teams. I do podcasts for my podcast for other people, and it's all about spreading the word of authentic leadership. And I have a download 21 traits of authentic leadership that I'm glad to share with your audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So Jan, living in the US, of course, you were in Wales a few months ago, I can say that. What is your connection with Wales? as we speak on daily basis? Are you in touch with your Welsh friends and
Yeah.
family, if you like, right? And please tell me what is going on, with Wales. We have been talking about the brain drain and the brain gain in Wales, right? What do you think about Wales now as an economy, where it stands as of today, and what do you think about it being a, how should I call it, American Wales, sitting in
Yeah.
America, yeah, yeah.
Right. Well, one of the reasons that I left my job was, first and foremost for leadership and culture, but secondly because I wanted to find a way to give back to my home country, to give back to Wales. And I couldn't be happier about taking the role of the USA hub leader for the Global Welsh.
Yes,
So the Global Welsh is an organization that connects the diaspora throughout the world. And I'm leading a group of people, and we all think very much the same. We're in different industries, we have different backgrounds, but we're committed to helping Welsh businesses expand into the US. And what that really, really means is, because obviously we're not, we don't have teams of people behind us. But
yeah,
if you're a Welsh business and you are thinking about expanding into the US, you might like to have a conversation with somebody who's in your target market, but not in a sense that you're pitching them the product, just to see
yes,
if, to understand a little bit more about it and to see if it's something that you really want to pursue. Then you would go off and you'd work with the Welsh government or whomever to help you make that happen. So we're, think of us very early funnel, sort of soft power kind of approach to use our networks to help Welsh businesses. And I love that because, as many of us here in the US, we've been here for decades, as I have, we want to give back to our home country. We love Wales, and this is a way that we can do that. So I am thrilled with the Global Welsh and the growth I've seen in the business membership too with the Global Welsh, which is awesome. And that makes me happy. Now, you asked me a question about Wales as a country and what do I think about it. I mean, Wales is my home. It always will be. My heart will always be in Wales. I love coming back every year, come home every year. The farm that I grew up in, I had to sell that many years ago, but I stay at West Farm in Southern Down, which is a beautiful property. It's right on the ocean. It's right on the beach practically. And I love going for walks in Wales. And I love learning about what's happening with the Welsh government and what, of course, after Brexit. And I do think that Wales has a lot of potential, but Wales needs to see that in themselves the
yes,
same way that I saw the potential in myself and step up on that global stage. Because so many Welsh businesses and the Welsh psyche is more about sort of stay in your lane
yes,
and don't get ahead of yourself. And if you're going to sell in the American market, you better get out of your head and really start to sell who you are and the belief in your product or service, because that's what will drive your success in the US. You cannot be shy about it. And I love helping companies do that.
yeah, absolutely. We always talk about this thing here in Wales. So I came to Wales 2.5 years ago. I had no idea where Wales was before. Just took a train from London. I came from Poland, and Wales is my home, and I really love it. And we always talk about this thing that we must be louder and prouder as as
Yes,
as Welsh companies and Welsh entrepreneurs, and we must learn to move fast and break things. It's okay.
that's
I mean,
right.
you don't have to be in your lane all the time.
That's so true. That is so true.
Jan, I know I've taken a lot of your time. Before I let you
Yeah.
go, I have one last very, very important question for you, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Can we learn authentic leadership? If we can, how?
Yes. You can learn it, but you have to, first of all, get rid of this preconceived notion that you may have in your head of what leadership is.
Right. Mm.
So if you've got this model in your mind, this mold of command and control, you've got to break through that first and be open to a different style of leadership. Then I've taken all of my experience plus everything I've learned from people I've interviewed on the podcast and condensed it down into these 21 traits of authentic leadership. That's a great place to start. And yes, you can learn it, but you have to be open and you have to want it.
Lovely. So one can learn authentic leadership, and the best place to start will be, your examples of 21 traits of authentic leadership, and that's a
Yeah.
great place to start. Jan, we would love to share that with our audience, and of course,
Great.
also on social media. Jan, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you. Always good to talk to you, Aman. I wish you much success in your business.
Thank you very much.